Picture this scenario. You're lying in bed at 2 in the morning, mindlessly scrolling through Instagram, and suddenly you're hit with an endless parade of engagement announcements, house purchases, exotic vacation photos, and brand new cars that cost more than you made last year. There's Sarah from college posting photos of her kitchen renovation that probably cost $40,000. There's your coworker Jake standing in front of a Tesla with the caption "Dreams do come true." And there's your high school friend Emma on what appears to be her 5th international vacation this year, sipping champagne in what looks like a 5-star resort in the Maldives. Meanwhile, you're lying there in your rental apartment, wondering if you should feel guilty about that $15 lunch you bought yesterday instead of meal prepping like you planned. You're questioning whether you're completely failing at this whole adulting thing. You're doing the math in your head about whether you can afford to go to your friend's destination wedding next year without putting it on a credit card. Sound familiar? Here's what's really messing with your head, and this is something that affects almost everyone in their 30s, whether they admit it or not. You're in your 30s now, which means you've officially entered the decade where everyone expects you to have your financial life completely figured out. Not just getting by, not just surviving, figured out. The problem is nobody told you what figured out actually means. And worse, the version of financial success that gets shoved down your throat on social media bears almost no resemblance to what real financial progress actually looks like for most people. My name is Keith, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, human psychology, and why so many incredibly responsible people feel like complete financial failures when they're actually doing better than they realize. If you've ever wondered whether you're secretly killing it financially or if you really are as far behind as you feel, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps you see your financial situation more clearly. Now, before we dive into the signs that you're actually doing well financially, let me paint you a picture of what's really happening to people in their 30s. This is the decade where the comparison game reaches absolutely toxic levels. You're no longer comparing yourself to college friends who are eating ramen and living with 3 roommates in a house that smells like old pizza and regret. Now you're comparing yourself to people who seem to be buying houses in neighborhoods you can't even afford to drive through, having destination weddings that cost more than most people's cars, and posting photos from their 3rd European vacation this year while you're trying to figure out if you can afford to replace your phone that's been held together with duct tape for the past 6 months. The psychological pressure is intense because society has convinced you that your 30s are when real financial success should be visible. Not building wealth quietly in the background, not developing good habits that will pay off over decades. Visible success. The kind that shows up in Instagram posts and dinner party conversations. The kind that makes other people nod approvingly when you tell them about your life. But here's what nobody talks about, and this might be the most important thing you hear all day. The version of financial success you're comparing yourself to is largely fictional. It's a carefully curated highlight reel that has very little connection to actual financial health. That couple posting photos from their dream vacation to Italy, staying in hotels that cost $800 per night, they might have put the entire 2-week trip on credit cards and are now facing payments that will take them 2 years to pay off. Your coworker who just bought that beautiful house with the perfect kitchen and the landscaping that looks like it belongs in a magazine, they might be house poor, spending 60% of their income on mortgage payments and having anxiety attacks every time the water heater makes a weird noise because they know they can't afford to fix it if it breaks. Everyone talks about the financial milestones you should hit in your 30s. You should own a house by 35. You should have at least 1 year's salary saved for retirement by 30. You should be debt-free except for your mortgage. You should have 6 months of expenses saved in an emergency fund that you never touch. You should be maxing out your 401k contributions. You should have started investing in index funds years ago. You should have a side hustle generating passive income. The list goes on, creating this impossible standard that makes most people feel like they're failing at basic adulting. But here's where things get interesting, and this is going to sound controversial, but I need you to really hear this. Most of these benchmarks are completely arbitrary and have very little connection to how real people build wealth over time. They're based on outdated economic conditions, unrealistic income assumptions, and a one-size-fits-all approach to financial planning that ignores the fact that everyone's situation is different. The truth is, if you're consistently saving something, anything, even if it's just $50 per month, you're already doing better than 60% of Americans. According to the Federal Reserve's latest survey of consumer finances, the median savings account balance for people in their 30s is about $4,000. Not $40,000, not $20,000, $4,000. That means half of all 30-somethings have less than $4,000 saved. So if you're sitting there feeling like a failure because you don't have the mythical 6-month emergency fund that personal finance experts insist you need, you're actually comparing yourself to a standard that most people haven't reached and probably never will. You think having debt automatically means you're failing financially. Every time you log into your student loan account and see that balance that seems to mock you with its refusal to go down despite your monthly payments, you feel like you're falling behind. Every time you remember that you still carry a small credit card balance from that emergency car repair last year, you feel like you're not a real adult. The personal finance world has convinced you that all debt is evil and that successful people don't owe money to anyone. But here's where this thinking falls apart completely. Some debt actually indicates that you're making smart financial decisions that will pay off over time. If you have student loans, that means you invested in education that likely increased your earning potential by tens of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. If you have a reasonable car loan on a reliable vehicle, that means you prioritize transportation that gets you to work consistently instead of driving a 15-year-old car that breaks down every other month and costs you money in lost wages and towing fees. The real question isn't whether you have debt. It's whether your debt is working for you or against you. Good debt helps you build wealth over time by allowing you to invest in assets or opportunities that increase in value or generate income. Bad debt reduces your wealth over time by financing consumption that provides no lasting benefit. Student loans that helped you get a degree that increased your income. Good debt, even if the balance feels overwhelming. A mortgage on a house you can afford in a neighborhood you want to live in. Good debt, even if the monthly payment feels scary. Credit cards used to fund a lifestyle you can't actually afford. Buying things you don't need to impress people you don't like. Bad debt that's actively making your life worse. You feel financially behind because you can't afford to buy a house. Every month you write that rent check and feel like you're throwing money away while your friends are building equity and getting tax deductions. You scroll through Zillow looking at houses you'll never be able to afford and feel like you're failing at one of the basic requirements of American adulthood. Homeownership has been drilled into your head as the ultimate sign of financial success in your 30s. But the math on homeownership is way more complicated than most people realize, and renting might actually be the smarter financial choice depending on your situation, your market, and your life goals. When you rent, your monthly housing cost is fixed and predictable. You know exactly what you'll pay each month, and when something breaks, you call your landlord and it gets fixed without touching your bank account. When you own a home, your housing costs include mortgage payments, property taxes, homeowner's insurance, maintenance, repairs, HOA fees, and the opportunity cost of having tens of thousands of dollars tied up in a down payment. Here's a reality check that might surprise you and possibly change how you think about the rent versus buy decision. In many markets, especially expensive coastal cities, renting is actually cheaper than owning when you calculate the true total cost of home ownership over a 5 to 10 year period. Take a typical scenario in a city like Denver or Austin. You could rent a nice 2-bedroom apartment for $3,000 per month, or you could buy a comparable townhouse with a mortgage payment of $2,800. On the surface, buying seems like the better deal because you're building equity instead of paying someone else's mortgage. But when you add property taxes that might be $400 per month, homeowner's insurance that runs another $200 monthly, PMI because you could only put down 10%, maintenance costs that average 1 to 3% of the home's value annually, and the opportunity cost of having $40,000 tied up in a down payment that could be earning 8% in the stock market, your real monthly cost of ownership might be closer to $4,000. Suddenly, that $3,000 rent payment looks like a bargain, especially when you factor in the flexibility to move for better job opportunities without worrying about selling a house in a down market. You think you're not saving enough because you don't have $50,000 sitting in your bank account earning basically nothing in interest. You see financial advice telling you to have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved, and when you calculate what that means for your lifestyle, it feels impossible. If your monthly expenses are $4,000, you're supposed to have $12,000 to $24,000 just sitting there doing nothing except making you feel secure. So you assume you're failing at the savings game. But the reality of how much people actually have saved is going to shock you and probably make you feel a lot better about your own situation. The median retirement account balance for people aged 30 to 39 is about $37,000. That includes people who have been maxing out their 401k since they started working and people who have never contributed a single dollar to retirement savings. The average emergency fund for 30-somethings is closer to $3,000, not the $15,000 to $20,000 that financial advisors recommend with such certainty. If you're consistently putting money away, even if it's a small amount that feels insignificant, you're building the most important financial skill anyone can develop, which is the habit of paying yourself first before paying everyone else. Someone who saves $100 every month for 10 years without fail will end up with more wealth than someone who saves nothing for 9 years and then tries to save $1,200 per month in year 10 to catch up. Consistency beats amount every single time because consistency creates a habit, and habits create results that compound over decades. The person who automatically transfers $50 to their savings account every month without thinking about it has developed a financial habit that will serve them for the rest of their life. The person who saves $300 one month when they get a bonus, nothing for 3 months when life gets expensive, then $500 the next month when they feel guilty, hasn't developed a habit at all. They've developed a pattern of financial anxiety followed by overcorrection followed by more anxiety. Social media makes it look like everyone else is living lavishly while you're clipping coupons and eating leftovers for lunch 3 days in a row. You see the constant stream of restaurant photos, vacation pictures, shopping hauls, and lifestyle content that makes it seem like everyone else has figured out how to afford a life you can only dream about. Your feed is full of people who seem to eat out every night, wear different outfits that still have tags on them, and take weekend trips to places that would blow your entire monthly fun budget. But there's a psychological phenomenon happening here that most people don't recognize, and understanding it will change how you feel about your own financial choices. The people who post the most about their lifestyle are often the ones struggling the most financially. When someone is truly financially secure, they don't need to broadcast their spending to feel successful or validate their choices. They're confident in their decisions regardless of what other people think or whether anyone notices. The lifestyle inflation you see on social media is often funded by debt, not income. That friend who's always posting photos from expensive restaurants with bills that are probably $150 for 2 people, they might be putting every meal on credit cards and have no idea how they're going to pay for it all. The coworker who seems to buy new clothes every week and always has the latest everything, they might be maxing out store credit cards and barely making minimum payments while their debt grows larger every month. Think about the incentives at play here. The people who are truly doing well financially are probably spending their money on things that don't make for interesting social media content. They're maxing out their retirement contributions, paying extra on their mortgage, building emergency funds, and investing in index funds. None of that makes for engaging Instagram posts. Meanwhile, the people who are struggling financially are more likely to post about the occasional splurge purchase or expensive dinner because those moments feel special and worth documenting precisely because they can't afford them regularly. You think you need to have your financial life completely figured out by now. You're in your 30s, which feels like the decade when real adults have real money and make real financial decisions with confidence and knowledge. Every financial mistake feels like evidence that you're behind where you should be at this stage of life. Every time you realize you don't understand something about investing or taxes or insurance, you feel like you missed some crucial life lesson that everyone else learned. But here's something that might change your entire perspective on financial timeline pressure and the anxiety that comes with feeling behind. Your 30s are actually the decade when most people are still building the foundation for wealth building, not the decade when wealth building is supposed to be complete or when you should have everything figured out. The financial stress and uncertainty you feel in your 30s often means you're actually ahead emotionally and intellectually because you're taking money seriously and thinking about your financial future. People who feel zero financial stress in their 30s are often the ones who aren't paying attention to their financial situation at all. They're not worried because they're not looking at the numbers, not planning for the future, and not thinking about the consequences of their financial decisions. The fact that you're concerned about your financial progress, that you're reading articles and watching videos about money, that you're questioning whether you're doing enough, means you're thinking about your financial future more seriously than most people ever will. The anxiety you feel about money isn't a sign that you're failing at adulting. It's a sign that you care about building a secure financial future and that you understand the stakes involved. That awareness and concern is going to serve you well over the next several decades as you make financial decisions that compound over time. Let's talk about something that nobody mentions in personal finance articles but everyone experiences in real life. The relationship between financial security and peace of mind isn't linear or predictable. You might assume that having more money always means feeling less stressed about money, but that's not how it actually works in practice. Some of the most financially stressed people I know have high incomes and substantial savings accounts. They're stressed because they're constantly comparing themselves to people who have even more, or because they're worried about losing what they've built, or because they feel pressure to maintain a lifestyle that requires everything to go perfectly. Meanwhile, some of the most financially peaceful people I know have modest incomes but have built spending habits that align perfectly with their values and financial reality. They know exactly where their money goes each month, they're not trying to impress anyone with their purchases, and they've accepted that building wealth is a long-term process that doesn't always feel exciting or impressive in the short term. You measure your financial success by absolute dollar amounts rather than by the systems you've built. You think you need to have a certain net worth or a certain amount saved to consider yourself financially successful. Every time you see those articles about how much money you should have saved by 30 or 35, you feel like you're falling behind if your numbers don't match the arbitrary benchmarks they throw around. But here's what those articles don't tell you, and this might be the most important insight for long-term wealth building. The people who build significant wealth over time don't focus on absolute numbers or comparing themselves to other people's milestones. They focus on building financial systems that work automatically in the background of their lives, regardless of what's happening in the economy or their personal life. The real measure of financial success in your 30s isn't how much money you have right now. It's whether you've built financial habits and systems that compound over time without requiring constant willpower or perfect execution. Someone who consistently saves 10% of their income, even if their income is modest, will end up wealthier than someone who saves nothing for years and then tries to catch up by saving 30% for a few months when they feel motivated. Someone who invests regularly in simple index funds and ignores market volatility will build more wealth than someone who tries to time the market or pick individual stocks based on hot tips and social media recommendations. The financial habits you build in your 30s will determine your financial reality in your 40s, 50s, and beyond. If you're developing the habit of saving first and spending second, you're building a foundation for wealth that will serve you for decades. If you're learning to distinguish between wants and needs, between immediate gratification and long-term satisfaction, you're developing the skill that keeps people wealthy even after they have money. Here's something that might surprise you about the relationship between age and wealth building that most personal finance advice gets completely wrong. Your 30s are actually the perfect time to be building financial foundations because you're old enough to take money seriously and understand the consequences of financial decisions, but you're young enough for compound interest and time to work dramatically in your favor. Someone who starts investing consistently at 35 will likely end up wealthier than someone who starts at 25 but stops and starts repeatedly based on how they feel about the market or their financial situation. Let's get real about something that financial advice rarely addresses honestly. Your 30s are probably going to be financially stressful no matter how well you're actually doing. This is the decade when life gets expensive in ways you didn't anticipate. You might be dealing with student loan payments that feel like they'll never end, trying to save for a house while rent keeps going up, thinking about starting a family and all the costs that entails, caring for aging parents who didn't save enough for retirement, and building a career that requires investments in education, networking, and professional development. The financial pressure you feel isn't evidence that you're doing something wrong or that you're behind where you should be. It's evidence that you're living a full adult life with adult responsibilities and competing financial priorities. The secret isn't to eliminate financial stress completely, because that's probably not realistic for most people. The secret is to build financial systems that can handle the stress and uncertainty without breaking down when life gets complicated. You know what the real sign is that you're doing well financially in your 30s? It's not your net worth or your income or whether you own a house or how much you have in your retirement account. It's whether you've developed a healthy, intentional relationship with money. Can you spend money on things you value without guilt or anxiety? Can you say no to expenses that don't align with your priorities without feeling deprived? Do you feel in control of your financial decisions instead of feeling like money controls you and your choices? So the next time you're lying in bed at 2 in the morning, scrolling through social media and feeling like everyone else has their financial life figured out while you're struggling to make sense of it all, remember this: the people who are truly doing well financially aren't the ones posting about their lifestyle on Instagram. They're the ones making boring, consistent financial decisions that don't make for interesting social media content but compound into real wealth over decades. They're saving automatically, investing systematically, and spending intentionally. And if that sounds like what you're trying to do, even imperfectly, then you're doing better than you think.